And in staying with news regarding the US president, Donald Trump has denounced Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as a dictator without elections and said he had better move fast to secure a peace deal or he would have no country left. Trump has now widened the rift with Kyiv while actually pivoting closer to Russia. The US president's recent exchange of insults with Zelenskyy and his apparent willingness to accept many of Moscow's demands in peace negotiations over the Ukraine war have stunned Washington's European allies. Even longtime US-Russia watchers were surprised at how swiftly Trump has seemingly turned anti-Ukraine and also adopted Kremlin talking points. Now, as Moscow and Washington look towards normalizing their relations, with the Kremlin suggesting American firms could do more business in Russia, they are meeting on equal ground as partners. Putin is actually no longer the kid slouching at the back of the classroom, as some experts argue. Just listen in to what Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy had to say.
But think of it, a modestly successful comedian. President Zelenskyy talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won, that never had to start and never would have started if I was president, not even a chance, and it didn't start for 4 years. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh no, his polls are good, give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, yes, sir, to say that he's pretty easy. A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia.
Voice of America's Jessica Stone is with us with the latest update. Jessica, we've just heard Donald Trump inflating the amount of money the US provided in aid and asserting without evidence that half of it is missing. He's clearly said that Zelensky's played Biden like a fiddle. How do US officials and analysts interpret Trump's stance on Zelenskyy and Ukraine now?
Well, there's certainly quite a bit of alarm among analysts here in Washington that, as you mentioned, Donald Trump appears to be blaming Ukraine for starting a war that Russia, in fact, started almost 4 years ago now. And in terms of whether or not Zelenskyy had another election, they chose not to have an election in the Ukraine because of the war. They didn't want to hold one during the fight. Zelenskyy, meantime, has also said his fair bit about Donald Trump, saying that he is actually being influenced by Russian disinformation, pointing out that he is apparently captive to some of these Russian talking points. Now, Vice President J.D. Vance has been very explicit. He gave an interview to the Daily Mail today in which he said, Zelenskyy is getting bad advice on how to deal with Trump. You don't want to go head to head with him and criticize him in public. And he said, quote, the idea that Zelenskyy is going to change the president's mind by bad mouthing him in public media, everyone knows that who knows the president will tell you that's a bad idea. So that's kind of where things stand, but it does bear emphasizing that this is a really big shift in the U.S. position on Ukraine and on Russia. And while there are many who agree with President Trump's stance that the war should be ended, there is going to be a lot more devil in the detail as to how it's ended and with whom that agreement is made.
And Jessica, with Europe largely limited to issuing threats of sanctions, what does this actually say about its ability or willingness to counter Russian aggression effectively?
Well, Europe itself is not on the same page. There are some countries who want to provide troops to sustain a ceasefire. There are others who do not. They also have differing amounts and ability to increase their defense spending. There's a European Union, European Commission rule that does not allow them to count defense spending under the European budget limits. They're looking to change that right now. And the European position continues to be, despite that division, that the only way Ukraine will engage in these talks is if it has a European security guarantee. But there are real questions about whether Europe can even do that, whether they can muster the kinds of combat-ready troops that would be needed to do that.
Yes.
And so we should see this conversation extend into next week, when we expect to see the leaders of England and France come to Washington to speak with Donald Trump. That, of course, is British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. They're expected here in Washington next week.
Jessica, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the Lowdown.
Good to be with you.